Let me ask you, should I keep the Twitter going or not? Keep it going? I think so.
It's absolutely essential for all FX traders and certainly equity sectors as well to pay close attention to what Donald Trump is tweeting, said by Alastair McCaig from Fern Wealth Management. Thursday, the UK government published a 77-page white paper on Brexit. So are investors welcoming this certainty around leaving the UK, and how has the sterling reacted?
Well, I think the white paper still leaves a lot of questions unanswered as to exactly how the UK and Theresa May's government are going to navigate negotiations with the EU. I think some clarity has been given in regards to passporting rights, and certainly the UK stance on rights to existing EU nationals within the UK looks very clear. I think we will be very interested to see how much flexibility might materialize later on in the year once this has actually been triggered in March, assuming that it can get there, of course, by the European counterparties. Certainly all of the rhetoric we've heard up to this point in time has been pretty strongly worded in regards to their lack of flexibility over their four-pillar issues. But when push comes to shove, and when you consider the volume of GDP for some of the major nations when it comes to imports and exports with the UK, I think we'll find that negotiations will see flexibility required on both parties.
The latest Federal Reserve meeting disappointed some dollar bulls, and investors have no reason to prepare for an interest rate hike in the near future. So in light of the US jobless claims falling and factory activity at a 2-year high, is the current picture painted of the US economy a good one?
I think there's two different mindsets that traders and investors have when it comes to looking at the US and its economy. Firstly, much of the data that we've seen released from the US has been, broadly speaking, quite positive, and certainly this week's ADP figures were very strong, superseding expectations by a considerable margin, painting the way for a more optimistic non-farm payroll figures too. We are still factoring in at least another 2 interest rate rises from the US, but it's unsurprising that the FOMC and specifically the Fed Chair Janet Yellen are reluctant to pull the trigger on another interest rate rise so quickly after Donald Trump has taken power. We've seen the volatility of the US dollar strength increase in the last month or so since he has taken office, as many of his policies begin to become clearer. And certainly one of the major driving forces when it comes to dollar strength has been his tough stance in regards to trade negotiations and where the US stand. And I think there's still a lot of question marks as to how the Eurozone will factor up against the US.
Subsequent to Donald Trump stating the US dollar was too strong, what future impact can we expect Donald to have on the FX markets?
When we look at the dollar strength, it has been strong since Donald Trump took over. I think it's worth considering that in the years to come, we are highly likely to see an increase in debt materialize in the U.S. as he looks to utilize that as a means of paying for much of the infrastructure spending. That being said, the U.S. dollar, obviously the currency of choice, de facto currency of choice in the globe, there will be a pretty healthy appetite for that U.S. debt. And I think the appetite for construction and consumption as far as Europe and the US is concerned will go a long way to driving how the Asian markets perform. So all of these should ensure that we see plenty of volatility with the US dollar. It's also worth noting as well that Donald Trump has stated on a number of occasions his fondness of utilizing Twitter as his primary means of communication with the direct US voting public and the rest of the global investment world, for that matter. Twitter. And we have noted that on many of his tweets, even without there being government or US policies to back them up, the markets are swiftly reacting to his tweets, and that is going to ensure that we see plenty of volatility over the rest of 2017.
So finally, do you think that Donald Trump's Twitter is one of the key FX drivers at present?
I would think it's an absolute essential for all FX traders, and certainly a number of equity sectors as well, the biotechnology, for instance, construction. Many of these companies need to pay close attention to what he's tweeting.
Alastair, thank you for your thoughts. That's all from us. We'll be back on Monday with an insight into what to look ahead for.